Did you ever wonder how the Shibuya incident would proceed if Nobara hadn't died? Would her curse technique make a huge difference during the all-out war, or her opponents would just mop the floor with her? First of all, R.I.P. Kugisaki Nobara. She was by far one of my favorite JJK characters of all time. Her savage and brash attitude was always on point whenever she appeared on screen, but her untimely death broke not only Yuji Itadori, but also fans who witnessed the heartbreaking scene. Despite all that's happened, I can't help but think, what would have happened if she did not die? Because it was revealed that Kugisaki could do the same thing Itadori could, and that is to harm Mahito's soul. With that being said, here's my input on how Kugisaki would survive and play a huge part during the Shibuya Incident Arc. During the actual flow of the story, Kugisaki is shown to have met Mahito's body double. During their brief encounter, Kugisaki held on her own pretty well against the special Great Spirit's shape-shifting clone. After being on the receiving end, we see Nobara land a few solid hits that put Mahito on the ropes after his soul was badly damaged by Nobara's resonance technique. Fortunately, Mahito's clone was unable to perform idle transfiguration on its opponents, but could transform itself into any shape or form if desired. Nobara encountering the clone and not the main body could be called a stroke of both good and bad luck. Why, you ask? Well, for starters, she was lucky to face the clone because she survived that long, and at the same time unlucky because through this encounter, Mahito was alerted that Itadori was not the sole threat to his existence. Therefore, he was able to eliminate the weaker threat before it could become a huge obstacle in his way. If she had not encountered Mahito, or maybe if she was successful in killing the clone, she could have become an ace up their sleeve to properly deal with Mahito without suffering so much injury. If, and it's a pretty big if, Nobara did survive, here's how it would play out in my mind. After the Iso and Kechizu versus Nobara and Itadori event happened, we see Mahito along with Sugura Geto approach Kokichi Muta, aka Mechamaru, in an undisclosed area where Mechamaru was residing. Later on, it was revealed that Mechamaru made a deal with Mahito and Geto, where he gives them important information about Jujutsu High, and in return, Mahito will heal Mechamaru's original body. Now, what does this have to do with Nobara? Well, you see, during his fight with Mahito, he devised a plan of attack that actually worked on the special Great Spirit. Now, we all know that a physical attack could do Mahito no harm. But for the first time ever, we see someone other than Itadori damage the arrogant cursed spirit. By using a simple domain on his weapons, Mechamaru was able to neutralize Mahito's idle transfiguration for a while and put the hurt where it stings most for the special grade. Not only that, but Mechamaru was also the second person to last a significant amount of time inside Mahito's domain expansion. Don't forget, when a person is caught inside a domain, the sure hit effect will automatically lock into those who possess cursed energy. But long story short, even though Mechamaru lost in his fight with Mahito, he still had valuable information that could help every single Jujutsu sorcerer fight almost evenly with Mahito, especially characters like Nanami and Todo. Okay, so moving on, we see Mechamaru create a contingency plan on the events where he lost his life in his fight against Mahito. During the Shibuya incident, the tiny Mechamaru he created would latch on to Itadori and reveal all the information he had collected all this time. But what if he created multiple of these mini Mechamarus for every possible sorcerer that would make an appearance during the Shibuya incident? Well, if that were to happen, things would go even more smoothly for the sorcerers, since the announcement of Gojo being sealed wouldn't spread so fast. We all know that Itadori practically announced it to the whole city. If every sorcerer had a mini Mechamaru on them, the run-ins they would have from other Jujutsu sorcerers and cursed spirits would drop drastically. Not to mention, since Mechamaru has eyes on Shibuya, every sorcerer would know what's actually happening, and this would include Nobara. Assuming this did happen, Nobara wouldn't be kept in the dark anymore. After hearing all the vital information from Mechamaru, she would have greater chances of surviving the following events. Going back to the time when both Yuji and Nobara fought Mahito in the same time, Nobara would be able to anticipate Mahito's attacks. So far, all she knows is that getting touched by Mahito would mean bad news. But this time around, she also knows how to protect herself if she was in a pinch against the special grade cursed spirit. At first, the Nobara versus Mahito will follow the original flow, where they fight fiercely, and it revealed that Nobara can also damage Mahito's soul up to the point where Mahito's clone starts running away, baiting Nobara towards a trap. But this time, a drastic change will occur. Being aware of Mahito's cunning nature, Nobara anticipates his next move and drops a simple domain to protect herself before running after the cursed spirit. Following this is the unexpected encounter between her and the original Mahito in the subway, which originally led to Nobara's death. But since this is an alternate version of this story, the simple domain Nobara cast on herself proved to be effective in protecting her soul from Mahito's curse technique. The problem is that although she may not have died because of the simple domain, that doesn't mean she came out of the encounter unscathed. After Mahito's hand came into contact with Nobara's face, she was successful in protecting her soul, but not the flesh that was exposed to Mahito's technique. The part of her face where Mahito's hand landed left a huge ass scar, much like how Todo's hand was damaged when he used Mahito's hand to clap and switch places with Itadori. After witnessing this turn of events, Mahito, for the first time ever, feels uneasiness creeping up on him, because now he has two problematic people who can straight up harm his precious soul. But Nobara surviving Mahito's idol transfiguration doesn't mean she will help Itadori in eliminating the special grade curse spirit. Instead, Nobara will still be badly hurt and will be deemed unfit to fight. This is where the original plot falls back into where Todo and Itadori go all out with Mahito in their iconic 2 versus 1 brawl. In conclusion, Nobara's survivability would fall on Mechamaru's shoulders and every info he has over Geto's plans as well as Mahito's abilities. Meanwhile, as Itadori and Todo fight against Mahito, Arata Nita, a jujutsu sorcerer with healing abilities who originally took Nobara's lifeless body away from the battlefield, will play the same role. But this time, instead of putting Nobara's body in a suspended state, he will be healing her wounds instead and taking her to Shoko for a more thorough healing session. But not even the best reverse curse technique user could fix her up to full fighting condition. What happens to Kugisaki after the Shibuya incident? Now, all the events that I will state here will not be referenced to the manga chapters in the original plot, but I will say that the events that will happen here are after the Itadori extermination arc and during the perfect preparation arc. So, with that being said, let me paint a picture for you of the state Kugisaki Nobara found herself in after the nightmarish Shibuya incident. After Mahito almost put her face on a t-shirt a few days later, Kugisaki finally regained her consciousness. Lying in the cold, sterile hospital room, she was an absolute mess, body wrapped up tighter than a mummy, tubes and wires sticking out from every which way. As she slowly took stock of the damage, it became glaringly obvious just how badly she'd been mangled. I'm talking one eye gone for good, bone shattered across her entire frame, internal organs battered to hell and back. By all reasonable accounts, she should have been well and truly dead. But as we all know, Kugisaki is a tough nut to crack. That willfulness and the flat-out refusal to just lay down and quit is what kept her from permanently biting the dust. Now, I don't need to tell you that recovering from such trauma is not easy. I mean, I'd like to see you smile after being so close to death's door. Long story short, Nobara went through some pitch-black periods during the arduous process. Things we all take for granted without a second thought. Speaking, sitting up, hell, even breathing those basic acts completely drained her at first. And that's not even touching on the nasty psychological wounds. Having escaped a scenario where so many others drew their last breath, I can only imagine the night she spent questioning whether she even deserved to keep on living. But through it all, her friends absolutely refused to let her succumb to the darkness and despair. Yuji, Megumi, and the whole loyal crew banded together and became her lifeline, with their encouragement and support guiding her through the endless cycles of grueling rehab and raw, open conversations about processing that trauma. Little by little, Nobara regained her footing. Of course, because of her desire to become stronger, it only took a few weeks for Nobara to step foot on the battlefield once again. But this wasn't the brash, supremely self-assured Nobara we'd all known and loved before Shibuya. No, not even the slightest. This was a young woman who'd stared death square in the face and come out the other side irrevocably changed, humbled to her very core by the realities of the harsh world we inhabit. And yet, that quintessential fire, that indomitable spirit that pulled her back from the grave, you could see it still burning fiercely in her eyes. With each minor victory she carved out against the new limitations of her battered body, her confidence started to rekindle. Nobara dug in and trained like a woman possessed. She meticulously adapted her fighting style to compensate for that lost eye, amplifying her deadliness through sheer bull-headed perseverance. When she wasn't relentlessly honing those techniques to a razor edge, she was meditating to overcome all the trauma she'd gathered after the incident. And after the news of the culling game reached her, Nobara didn't even hesitate. She instantly stepped up and volunteered to be amongst the proud few tasked with facing that unholy threat head-on. Naturally, Itadori and Megumi were against this and and tried to talk Kugisaki out of it, but no amount of protest could sway her steely resolve. Changed as she may have been, that steadfast loyalty lighting her path forward hadn't so much as flickered. If anything, having stared down the depths of the abyss and clawed her way back only strengthened her conviction to protect those precious few she held dear, no matter how high the cost. Now, this part of the story is where Nobara will really make her comeback. As the culling games go into full swing and colonies are slowly being overrun by cursed spirits and jujutsu sorcerers, Kugisaki Nobara, along with Itadori Yuji and Megumi Fushiguro, enters Tokyo #1 colony, one of the 2 colonies that was formed as the culling games started. Upon stepping foot inside Colony 1, the trio is transported to Ikebukuro with the goal of hunting down Higuruma and Reiji to use their 100 points to change the rules of the culling games. In order to cover more ground, the trio decides to split up, with Itadori and Kugisaki going for Higuruma, leaving Megumi to deal with Reggie Star on his own. Originally, Itadori is supposed to face off against 2 sorcerers named Haba and Hanyu before he gets a chance to face Higuruma, but this time it'll be a 2v2 with Kugisaki taking on Hanyu and Itadori fighting against Haba. During their battle, Hanyu is seen to have the upper hand against Nobara since she can't fly, but little does she know that Nobara has enough experience to know how to deal with flying opponents. After ramming herself into Nobara, Hanyu is confident that she's already won the fight. But as soon as Kugisaki gets back on her feet, she is seen attaching a lock of Hanyu's hair to a straw doll. With a devilish grin, Kugisaki imbues her cursed energy on a nail and strikes it down with her hammer, activating resonance. At the same time, Hanyu's curse technique stops working, sending her plummeting at high speeds. Seeing a window of opportunity, Kugisaki pulls out her toy hammer and swings it at Hanyu's head before she reaches the ground, instantly knocking her unconscious. On the other hand, Itadori quickly overpowered Haba by landing a devastating right straight punch on top of the helicopter man's head. After the encounter with Haba and Hanyu, Itadori and Kugisaki then proceed to follow up on their mission, which is finding Higuruma and use his 100 points. As Itadori and Nobara enter the theater, they see a strange man in the middle of the room inside a bathtub fully clothed and submerged in water. Later on, it is revealed that the strange man is actually the person they were looking for. As they exchange pleasantries with Higuruma, Itadori and Kugisaki go straight to business by trying to convince that they are trying to stop the culling games and ask Higuruma to use his points to create a rule that stops the force killing rule in the games. Higuruma, after hearing their plea, straight up declined their offer because of his own interests. Realizing that they are at an impasse, Kugisaki and Itadori are left with no choice but to subdue Higuruma and force him into doing what they want. Seeing this turn of events, Higuruma reluctantly stands up and summons a Shikigami, preparing to face the duo. After what seemed like an eternity of silence, before Itadori and Kugisaki could move, their environment suddenly changed, resembling that of a courtroom. Later on, it would be revealed that this was in fact Higuruma's domain expansion called Deadly Sentencing. Trapped inside the domain, Itadori and Kugisaki undergo a trial that would decide their fate. As they go back and forth, Itadori is found guilty of entering a pachinko shop while being underage and is sentenced to confiscation. On the other hand, since Deadly Sentencing has never been stated to be able to put multiple people on trial, Nobara is released from Higuruma's domain without any punishment. So while Itadori fights Higuruma without cursed energy, Kugisaki backs him up by shooting nails at their opponent. So how will Kugisaki help in defeating Higuruma? As the battle between Itadori and Higuruma rages on, Kugisaki launches a barrage of attacks at their opponent, much like Mahito. Higuruma also shrugs her off as someone who's not a threat to him. Focusing all his attention on Itadori, Higuruma underestimates the female sorcerer. Later on, a certain uneasiness creeps up on him, and as he glances back to Kugisaki's direction, he catches her grinning at him. In a split second, every nail that was thought to be thrown randomly started glowing and simultaneously increased in size. This caught Higuruma off guard as he defended himself from the countless giant nails protruding from everywhere. Seeing all this unfold, Itadori sees a chance and launches a mean flying kick that knocks Higuruma unconscious almost instantly. While waiting for Higuruma to wake up, Kugisaki and Itadori decide to tie him up to limit his movement so he doesn't cause unnecessary trouble any further. Later on, after regaining his consciousness, Higuruma looks back and remembers the reason why he became a lawyer. In the end, Higuruma accepts defeat and adds a no-killing rule to the culling games. With this success on their end, Kugisaki and Itadori proceed with their preparations to release their sensei, Gojo Satoru. After this, basically everything that happened in the original plot will happen as is, with the sole difference being that Nobara's presence is accounted for whenever Itadori and Megumi show up. One notable scene is in chapter 212, when Sukuna takes over Megumi's body. During this time, Kugisaki does her best to prevent the transfer from happening but ultimately fails, as she watches Sukuna possess Megumi's body for good. She felt helpless in the face of the King of Curses. As she stood there in complete shock, she immediately snapped back as soon as she saw Itadori engage in combat. Ultimately, Sukuna escapes with the help of Uraume, much like in the original plot. After Sukuna's success in taking over Megumi's body, the battle between the strongest sorcerer of today and the King of Curses will still happen. Sukuna will kill Gojo, Yuta will eliminate Sudo Gedo, and Jujutsu sorcerers will jump Sukuna as soon as Gojo loses. But this time, one person will play a massive role in Sukuna's defeat. Now, we all know one of Sukuna's fingers is still missing, right? Well, the reason for that is because Kugisaki has it in her possession. When the time is right, Kugisaki will use her curse technique to crush the King of Curses, giving her comrades enough time to land a decisive blow to end Sukuna's malevolence once and for all. Nobara's survival in the aftermath of Shibuya was nothing short of miraculous. Though forever changed by the harrowing ordeal, her indomitable spirit remained intact. She emerged a hardened warrior, shaped yet unbroken by her experiences. As Nobara looked ahead, she knew the challenges would be great. However, she would charge forward unflinchingly, her newfound family steadfast by her side. The saga's next chapter loomed, and they would confront it together as one. The story might proceed in a peculiar way from here on, but that's it for this what-if theory of Kugisaki survived in Shibuya. If you want to switch things up, why don't you check out this video of what if Sukuna was defeated by Mahoraga? What are you waiting for? Click it!